Here is a question nobody asks at the right time. What if the thing holding you back isn't laziness, isn't bad luck, and isn't the economy, but the size of your own thinking? Most people spend their entire lives working hard inside a ceiling they built themselves. They save carefully. They perform reliably. They do everything they were told was the right thing to do. And then one day they look up and realize the ceiling is still there, and it's lower than they ever admitted. This video is about that ceiling, what it's made of, why we build it, and how to take it apart. We're going to follow the story of a man named Leo, not because he's extraordinary, but because he's familiar. Because the trap Leo fell into is the same trap most people reading their own life story wouldn't even recognize as a trap. Leo is hardworking. Leo is responsible. Leo does everything right. And Leo has been standing completely still for 5 years. His problem has a name. It's called small thinking, and it is the quietest, most socially acceptable way to waste a life. Welcome back to GingerCast. Stay with Leo's story, because somewhere inside it, you might just find your own. They had gone to the same university in Edinburgh, shared a flat in second year, stayed close until life, in the way it does, quietly pulled them into different orbits. Mark had left their village at 22, with nothing but a one-way train ticket and a business idea everyone else thought was reckless. Leo had stayed cautious, sensible, safe. When Leo spotted him across the cafe, his first instinct was to pretend he hadn't. Not out of dislike, but out of that particular discomfort of running into someone who has become the version of themselves they always said they'd become, when you haven't. But Mark looked up, smiled, waved him over. Leo sat down across from him and said, "You look different. Good different." Mark smiled and said, "Older." Leo laughed softly and asked what he was working on. Mark told him he was scaling the second business, slower than he'd like, but moving. Then he asked, "How about you? Still at the logistics firm?" Leo said yes. "Going well, actually. They're talking about a 5% raise this quarter, which is, nice." Mark nodded, picked up his coffee, said nothing for a moment. Then he asked if he could say something, genuinely, not to be a pain. Leo said go ahead, and Mark asked, "Why are you spending your best energy figuring out how to preserve 5% when you could be asking how to grow 500%? Leo felt his jaw tighten. He told Mark that was easy to say, that he had rent, obligations, that he wasn't in a position to just, and Mark cut in gently and said he wasn't telling him to quit on Monday. He was asking about the question itself. When you set a target of 5%, what does your brain go looking for? Leo said slowly, "Ways to get 5%. Mark said exactly. Safe roads. Roads you already know. But when you genuinely ask yourself how to grow 500%, your brain can't use the old map. It has to build a new one, and that's where everything changes." Leo wanted to push back. He had the counter-arguments ready. The mortgage, the market, the timing. All of them legitimate. All of them real. But underneath the pushback was something quieter. A recognition he hadn't expected. Because the roads he'd been taking, the safe, reliable, sensible roads, had all led him to the same place. And he was sitting in a London cafe in the rain, wondering if that place was as good as it was going to get. It wasn't that Leo's carefulness was wrong. Carefulness, in its place, is a virtue. But there is a difference between being careful and being confined. And Leo, without ever making a single dramatic decision to do so, had spent 5 years building a very comfortable, very detailed life inside a box he'd never once tried to open. So why does this happen? Why do capable, intelligent, hardworking people consistently set the ceiling low and then defend it? The answer isn't weakness. The answer is wiring. The human brain is designed, at its core, for survival, not for ambition. Every time Leo considered something big, a career change, a side venture, a move to a different city, his brain did exactly what it was built to do. It scanned for risk. It found some, and it fired off a signal that felt indistinguishable from wisdom. Be realistic. Don't overreach. Remember the last time you tried something like this? That voice isn't your instinct. That voice is your nervous system's overprotective older sibling, and it has been running the show, quietly, for years. There's a metaphor I keep coming back to. You cannot build a skyscraper on a foundation designed for a cottage. It doesn't matter how skilled the builder is. It doesn't matter how beautiful the plans look on paper. If the foundation, the mindset, is built to hold something small, everything you construct on top of it will eventually settle back down to size. Small goals don't just produce small results. They produce small questions, small networks, small conversations, and small versions of what you're capable of. And here is the thing nobody warns you about. When you consistently aim low in order to guarantee the win, you don't just miss big things. You gradually stop being able to see them. If something in this is landing for you right now, if Leo's story feels a little too familiar, I want to invite you to subscribe to Gingercast. Not as a favor to the algorithm, but because this kind of honest, uncomfortable conversation is exactly what this channel is built for. The button's there. Come back for more of this. Now let's keep going. Mark leaned forward and said, "Let me ask you something different. If failure wasn't possible, if it was just completely off the table, what would you actually build?" Leo didn't answer immediately. He looked out at the Thames. Then he said quietly, "Something mine. Something that didn't need me to ask permission to grow." Mark looked at him steadily and asked, "Then what's actually stopping you?" Leo didn't have a clean answer, but for the first time in a long time, the absence of one felt like information rather than defeat. Leo didn't hand in his notice the following Monday. He didn't post anything on LinkedIn about his exciting new chapter. He did something harder than both of those things combined. He made 3 shifts, quietly, without announcing them to anyone. The first shift, he changed the room he was in. Mark had said it plainly. The people you spend the most time with are not just your social life. They are the invisible architecture of your expectations. Leo thought about his closest circle back in the village. Good people, honest people, people he loved. But every conversation eventually curved back toward weather, property prices, and whether the pub had sorted its kitchen out. Nobody talked about building anything from scratch. Nobody asked the kind of questions that made you uncomfortable in a productive way. So Leo started showing up in different rooms. Not to network in the transactional sense, not to collect business cards, just to hear people who were operating at a different frequency, and to let that frequency slowly recalibrate his own. But eventually, the internal conversation shifted. The questions he asked himself got larger. The ceiling, without any single dramatic moment, began to lift. The second shift, he started asking a different question. Mark had introduced him to what he called the 10x question. Not as a motivational exercise, as a practical cognitive tool. Instead of asking, "How do I do my job better?" Leo started asking, "How could this entire operation generate 10 times the value it does now?" The first question made him work harder inside the existing system. The second question made him see the system differently. He started noticing inefficiencies nobody had bothered to name. He started having conversations with people 2 levels above him, not because he was positioning himself, but because he was genuinely curious, in a way that turned out to be useful. He brought proposals, real ones, with numbers attached. 4 months in, Leo wasn't simply an employee doing his job well. He was the person in the room with the interesting perspective. And that is an entirely different kind of person to be. The third shift, he rewrote what failure meant. This was the hardest shift of the 3, and the most important. Because Leo's entire relationship with safety had been built on one foundational belief, that failure was a verdict, that trying something and not succeeding was proof, irrefutable proof, that it had been wrong to try. Mark had told him something that took weeks to fully absorb. The person who thinks big isn't the one who never fails. It's the one who decided, before they started, that failure is tuition, not a judgment on who they are. Tuition, not a verdict. Leo began keeping a second notebook. Not expenses, lessons. Every idea that got rejected, every pitch that landed flat, every conversation that ended awkwardly. He wrote down what it had taught him, not what it had cost him. The fear didn't disappear. He'd be lying if he told you it did. But slowly, steadily, it stopped being the thing that made his decisions for him. Leo hasn't made it yet. He would be the first person to tell you that. He still has the same desk in Bristol, still has the same Sunday evenings, still has days when the old voice comes back, the careful one, the sensible one, and suggests that maybe smaller really is safer. But here's what's changed. He knows now that the life he was living before wasn't the result of bad luck, or bad timing, or a village that was too small. It was the result of a small ask, a question asked too quietly, of too little. And you cannot get a large life from a small ask. The most dangerous thing about thinking small isn't that it fails dramatically. It fails quietly. It succeeds just enough to keep you comfortable, just enough to keep you from burning the ceiling down and building something that could actually hold all of who you are. So here is the question Mark left with Leo on a rainy Saturday afternoon at a riverside cafe in London. The same question I'm leaving with you now. What would you do? Build, start, become, if failure simply wasn't possible? Don't answer it out loud. Don't post it anywhere. Just sit with it. Let it be uncomfortable. Because that discomfort, that particular tightening in the chest when you let yourself want something real, is not a warning sign. It's the sound of your actual life knocking. Before we go, if you've stayed with Leo's story all the way here, then you already know what kind of person you are. The kind who finishes things. The kind who goes a little deeper. Gingercast is here for that kind of person. Subscribe if this is where you want to keep coming back. Share this with someone who needs to hear it more than they need another scroll. And leave think big in the comments so I know you were here. I'll see you in the next one. Keep thinking bigger than feels comfortable.